Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
You ever feel like you're alive and dead at the same time? Like you're walking around breathing, eating, pretending to function, but inside there's just this cold, quiet space where family should have lived? That's me. That was me for most of my life. And this story, if we're being real, starts on a freezing Christmas morning, me sitting in my apartment, watching my family's perfect photo drop on Facebook for the 10th goddamn year in a row, with all of them grinning like toothpaste models in front of Grandma's fireplace. Matching red pajamas, mugs of cocoa, and one thing missing: me. Again. It wasn't always this way. Or maybe it was, and I just didn't know it back then. I used to think family was something unbreakable, like a law of nature. But turns out, family isn't who you share blood with. It's who remembers you when the camera comes out. It's who saves you a seat without you having to ask. And for me, I was always the one standing off to the side, just out of frame, waiting to be pulled in, and never was. When I was 8, I asked my mom why everyone laughed when I said I wanted to be an inventor. She said, "Because you're always saying weird stuff, Miles." When I was 15, I spent every lunch break coding in the back of the school library while my cousins were getting high behind the gym. When I was 17, I launched my first app. Made $5,000. No one noticed. No one asked. My uncle called it a phase. I never forgot that. Let me be real clear with you here. I wasn't some tortured genius hiding in his room, begging for attention. I showed up. I came to birthday parties. I bought gifts. I called when my aunt got sick and even sent flowers. I was trying. I was always trying. But something about me just didn't fit their puzzle. Maybe I wasn't loud enough. Maybe I wasn't drunk enough. Maybe I just reminded them too much of something they didn't understand. Either way, I was left out of every group photo like it was some kind of inside joke, and I was the punchline. It became a tradition. Every year, the same damn thing. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, even my own mom's birthday, there'd be a photo. All of them, lined up like a holiday catalog. And me, watching from miles away, never tagged, never mentioned. At first, it hurt like hell. Then it became a sick kind of game. Where's Waldo? But it's where's Miles? Spoiler, not in the picture. The year before the Billboard, they actually had the nerve to Photoshop me in. I swear to God. Someone cropped my face from an old photo, probably from high school when I still had braces, and slapped it onto the edge of the couch, like I was sitting next to my cousin Jake, who I hadn't spoken to in 6 years. It looked like a hostage photo. My head didn't even match the lighting. I laughed so hard I cried. Or maybe I cried so hard I laughed. Same thing, really. Then came this year. The year it snapped. The year that broke whatever thin rope I'd been clinging to. It was December 18th. A Sunday. I was scrolling through texts and noticed something weird. My cousin Blake, God bless his clueless heart, sent a group message about who was bringing wine to Christmas dinner. I wasn't in the group. But Blake, that idiot, accidentally forwarded it to me too. I stared at it for a minute, not even mad. Just numb. Like, okay, that's how it is. I texted my mom, just to be sure. Hey, what's the plan for Christmas this year? She left me on read. Not even a thumbs up. Not even a "we're keeping it small this year." Just digital silence, the kind that makes you feel like you're yelling underwater and nobody's listening. I stared at that empty bubble until my phone went dark. I sat there, in the glow of my stupid LED Christmas tree, thinking about all the times I'd shown up for people who would rather pretend I didn't exist. 10 years of silence. 10 years of exclusion. 10 years of being the forgotten one. And you know what's wild? It didn't even make me sad anymore. It made me cold. Like ice burn, deep freeze, dead behind the eyes cold. That's when the idea started. A spark, quiet and smooth, slipped into my head like a whisper. If they don't want me in the picture, maybe it's time I make a picture they can't ignore. Maybe it's time they finally see me on their way to Grandma's house, like AF asterisk King Ghost standing in the middle of the road. They erased me from their world. So I decided to build a world of my own. One where I didn't have to beg to be seen. One where I was the headline, the story, the face on the wall. And not just any wall. A billboard. Right across the damn street from Grandma June's front yard. And it wasn't about payback, not exactly. It wasn't about making them hurt, at least not at first. It was about looking in the mirror and realizing I was never going to be invited in. Not to the party. Not to the photo. Not to the seat at the table. So I made my own damn table, and it was 40 feet high and lit from behind in full color. But that comes later. Right now, all I could do was stare at that picture again, zoom in, zoom out, count the faces, feel the ache. It wasn't even that I wasn't invited. It was that nobody missed me enough to lie about it. And that silence was louder than any billboard I could ever buy. But I was going to try anyway. Let's talk about the photos, because those damn things weren't just pictures, they were messages. Little polished lies wrapped in smiles and filters, and if you've ever been the one left out, you already know what I mean without me even having to explain it. They weren't family memories. They were family propaganda. Hand-picked faces, handcrafted angles, every photo curated like a storefront display, like they were selling the idea of a perfect, close-knit, cheerful family that didn't have any cracks in the glass. And if I'm being brutally honest here, the most consistent thing about those photos was that I was never, not once in 10 years, part of them. You ever stand outside a window in the winter, looking in at people laughing around a dinner table and realize the laughter would have been quieter if you were inside it? That's what those pictures felt like every damn time they posted one. The caption was always something syrupy and fake, like grateful for this tribe, or nothing like family during the holidays, and every time I saw it, I knew what was really being said was this: we're better off without you, Miles. Have you ever been left out of something important just because you didn't fit their picture? And I don't mean metaphorically. I mean literally. They didn't want me in the damn frame. Not my face, not my awkward grin, not my too quiet voice or too loud ambition. I wasn't their kind of photogenic. I wasn't drinking the same beer, laughing at the same dumb jokes, or living in the same town. And you know what's funny? None of it ever felt accidental. It felt like a decision every time. Like someone stood behind the phone and said, "Okay, everybody smile, Miles. Can you step out for just a second?" When I was 16, I remember this one argument with my mom. I had just launched a basic little budgeting app for high school students. I spent 2 months building it. I was so proud I could barely sleep. I showed her, and she said, "That's cute, but you know Blake just got promoted to assistant manager at the auto shop?" Like I was supposed to be impressed by that. Like that was the standard. And I remember saying, "Mom, I think I could really do something with this." And she said, "You always think that, Mr. Big Dreams." Mr. Big Dreams. That nickname stuck around way longer than it should have. At first, it was just Blake and my other cousin Sarah who used it, kind of teasing, kind of not. But it spread, like rot. At cookouts and weddings, I became the joke, the cousin who thought he was Steve Jobs because he brought a laptop to Grandma's one time. Never mind that by the time I was 20, I was paying my own rent. Never mind that by 22, I was helping my roommate pay his. I still wasn't in the photos. I still didn't fit the frame. There was one picture. I remember it too clearly. It was taken at my aunt's birthday, maybe 4 years ago. I was there, actually. For once. I flew across the country, took 2 days off work, paid for my own hotel, and brought a gift I knew she'd love. They did a group photo after the cake. I wasn't in it. I was in the kitchen, grabbing a trash bag to help clean up. When I walked back into the room, they were laughing, putting the phone down, already checking who looked best. No one said a thing. That night, I sat in the hotel and zoomed in on the photo. Every smiling face. Every hand on a shoulder. Every fake-ass smile. I wasn't just missing, I'd been timed out of the memory. Like it was choreographed. Like they waited for me to leave. And here's the part that still sticks in my throat. I didn't even ask them why. I didn't want to hear the excuse. Because I already knew. I didn't belong in the version of the family they wanted to present to the world. See, those photos were armor. They weren't for us, the people actually living the life. They were for the outsiders looking in, so my mom could feel like she raised the perfect crew, so Blake could flex his country club smile, so Sarah could post it with hashtags like #FamilyFirst and #GratefulHearts. But I wasn't a heart they were grateful for. I was the one they edited out every time, like a stain on the tablecloth. I didn't realize until much later that it was all performative. The hugs, the dinners, the occasional check-in. They wanted the idea of me, the kind you can mention in passing, "Oh, Miles? Yeah, he's doing some tech stuff out west," but they didn't want to include me in the actual narrative. They wanted a photo where nobody challenged their idea of what a Carter family Christmas should look like. And I was the challenge. I was the wrinkle in the linen, the tech guy who didn't drink, the one who left, the one who wanted something more than a job at the tire shop or a seat at the bar down the street. So they left me out. And after enough years of being erased, something inside me turned off. It wasn't that I didn't care anymore. It's that I started to realize that maybe the worst kind of loneliness isn't being alone. It's being surrounded by people who claim to love you, but don't care if you're in the picture or not. And that's when I stopped waiting for an invitation. That's when I started thinking about what it would feel like to force my way into the frame, in a way they'd never be able to crop out again. Because maybe I didn't belong in their story. But damn it, I was going to write my own. And I was going to make it too big, too loud, and too bright to ignore. It's weird how silence has a weight to it, how the absence of a reply can land heavier than any insult or scream, and that's exactly what happened the moment I realized this year's Christmas would happen without me again. Except this time, it wasn't subtle. It wasn't one of those vague exclusions that I could pretend was just a miscommunication or poor planning. No, this time it came with proof. This time, it came in the form of a dumb, clumsy, too fast thumb by my cousin Blake. It was December 18th, and I was sitting on my balcony with a coffee that had gone cold because I'd been too busy staring at the fog rolling across the hills behind my apartment to bother drinking it. My phone buzzed. I glanced down without much interest, thinking it was probably a work notification or one of those useless spam texts telling me I'd won some prize I never entered. But no, it was Blake. A group chat message. The name of the chat caught my eye first. Carter Christmas 24. Family only. Family only. I wasn't in the group. I wasn't supposed to see the message. But Blake, in his usual careless way, had forwarded the entire thing directly to me by mistake, probably trying to tag someone else and hitting my name instead. The message itself was mundane, the kind of logistical chatter families do before big dinners: who's bringing wine, who's cooking what time they're arriving, who's picking up grandma. And for a second, I just stared at it, the words swimming in my head, as if I couldn't fully believe what I was seeing. Then I read it again. And again. That phrase stuck in my throat like a nail, family only. So I did what any fool still holding on to hope might do. I sent my mom a text. Short, casual, trying not to sound needy or angry. Hey, just saw something about a Christmas dinner. Are we doing something at Grandma's this year? And then I waited. For a whole hour, I stared at the little message bubble that never moved, never turned into dots, never replied. Left on read. There it was, plain and cruel. The modern way of saying, you don't matter enough to answer. I don't know why I expected anything different. I really don't. You'd think after years of this same cold shoulder, I'd have grown some kind of emotional callus, something that would at least blunt the sting. But no, it hurt like hell. Not because I needed the food or the company or the awful gift exchange. I could buy myself better food, and my apartment was already more peaceful than any chaotic Carter Christmas had ever been. No, what hurt was the confirmation that I wasn't just forgotten, I was deliberately excluded. It brought back something sharp and bitter, a memory I hadn't thought about in years. The day I graduated from Stanford. I had worked like a man possessed for that degree. Late nights, part-time jobs, living on ramen and 5 hours of sleep, building apps in the dark while everyone else was partying or sleeping or living normal college lives. I sent out the invites, mailed them, emailed them, called, and not one of them showed up. Not my mom, not Blake, not Sarah, not Grandma June. I walked across that stage alone, looked into a crowd full of cheering families, and couldn't find a single familiar face. I smiled anyway. What the hell else was I supposed to do? But this year, this felt like a new kind of cruelty. I didn't throw a tantrum. I didn't send angry texts or call anyone demanding explanations. I did what I always do when people treat me like I'm invisible. I disappeared a little further. I booked a reservation at a little restaurant down the block that I liked, the kind with warm lighting and soft jazz and no expectations. I wore a nice jacket. I brought a book. I smiled at the waitress, tipped well, ate in silence. Later that night, back in my apartment, the photo dropped. Same fireplace. Same red pajamas. Same mugs of cocoa. All of them in the frame, smiling like toothpaste ads, arms slung over each other's shoulders, looking like they didn't have a single care in the world. And then I saw it. On the mantel behind them, barely noticeable unless you knew where to look. A photo frame. An old picture. One of our childhood family portraits, the kind taken at those studio places where everyone wears stiff clothes and fake smiles. Except this one had been edited. Badly. My face, my 8-year-old face, was cropped out. Poorly. You could still see the outline of where I'd been. A jagged edge where my arm had touched my brother's. They didn't even bother filling it in. Just a blank space, like I'd never existed. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't cry. That's the weird part. I felt something twist in my stomach, sure. But the tears didn't come. Instead, I laughed. Not a loud laugh. A soft one. The kind that comes from disbelief more than humor. Because you reach a point where the pain circles back around and becomes absurd. And that was the moment I realized something. They weren't going to stop. They were never going to see me. Not as I was. Not as I am. They wanted a version of the family that didn't include me, and they were committed to it, even if it meant photoshopping childhood memories. Even if it meant pretending I never stood in that room. Even if it meant cutting me out, again and again and again. So I decided, right then, that I was done playing quiet. Done waiting. Done asking. If they were going to pretend I didn't exist, then I was going to make damn sure the world couldn't pretend with them. I didn't want a seat at their table anymore. I wanted a billboard. And not just any billboard. I wanted the biggest goddamn stage I could find. There's a kind of quiet you feel right before you do something irreversible, not loud or dramatic like in the movies, but heavy and calm, like standing in the eye of a storm you know damn well you helped build. That's what I felt the day I signed the contract for the Billboard, the day I decided that being ignored wasn't something I'd swallow anymore. I wasn't going to send long texts or ask why they left me out or sit on another December night wondering why I couldn't be part of a family I was born into. I was done playing the invisible man in their picture-perfect little world. This time, I was going to be the only thing they saw. The idea didn't come all at once like some divine inspiration. It grew like mold, slowly, quietly, until it was everywhere. It started with that cropped photo from the mantel. That missing face. My missing face. I stared at it so long I stopped seeing the people and just saw the hole. And I thought, if that's how they wanted to remember me as a blank space, then maybe it was time to remind them that the space they left empty was the one running their old neighborhood now. So I called a guy I knew, an ad broker who owed me a favor after I helped him digitize his booking system back in my early startup days. I said I wanted the biggest, boldest billboard available in my hometown. He asked where, and I gave him the street name. Elmhurst Avenue. I didn't even have to say the number because the guy paused and then laughed softly. You mean the one right across from that old brick colonial with the white porch swing? Yeah, that one. Grandma June's house. He told me it was expensive, but available. Said the current ad was for a plumbing company whose lease expired the week before Christmas. I wired the money that afternoon, paid 6 months in advance. I wanted no risk of delays, no questions, no hiccups. This wasn't a passive-aggressive stunt. It was a surgical strike, clean and deliberate. Then came the design. I didn't want to be mean. That wasn't the point. If I made it ugly, if I called names, if I spelled it out in angry letters, they'd dismiss it as bitterness. I didn't want bitterness. I wanted impact. So I hired a designer out of San Francisco, one of those minimalist types who knows how to make a statement without screaming. We kept it simple. A portrait of me mid-smile, face turned slightly, lit like a magazine cover, clean, sharp, professional. No filters. Just truth. And beneath that? Just one line. White bold letters on deep black. Guess who made Forbes 30 under 30? No name. No logo. No website. No credits. Just the message. Because everyone in that town knew who it was. A few days before the install, I drove down to oversee the prep. The air smelled like pine and diesel, and the sky hung low, that soft December gray that always makes everything feel heavier than it is. That's when I met Rick, the guy in charge of mounting the billboard. Ex-Marine. Probably mid-50s. Wore his experience in the way he chewed his gum and didn't ask unnecessary questions. He looked at the mock-up, whistled low, and said, "You sure you want to go nuclear, kid?" I stared at the massive frame waiting for the vinyl wrap, then glanced across the street at the familiar porch where I used to eat freezer pops in the summer while Grandma told stories about how hard she had it growing up. I said, "They dropped the bombs a long time ago. I'm just showing them the crater." Rick just nodded. "Fair enough," he said. "Hell of a crater." He didn't ask who they were, and I didn't explain. Didn't need to. There's something universal about a man who's been pushed too far, and Rick had the kind of eyes that said he'd seen worse than family pettiness. As I watched the team mount my face 40 feet into the sky, I felt something shift in me. Not revenge. Not satisfaction. Something else. A cold, clear freedom. Because now, they couldn't pretend anymore. They couldn't scroll past me. They couldn't exclude me quietly. They couldn't act like I didn't exist. Not when I was staring down at them every time they backed out of Grandma's driveway. The billboard went up on December 22nd. Right on time. It lit up just before sunset, casting a warm, golden glow across the street. People slowed their cars to read it. A few took pictures. I heard later that Blake's girlfriend posted it on her Instagram story with no caption, just a pair of wide eyes and a shocked emoji. Even better, someone told me that Grandma didn't say a word the first time she saw it. Just stood on the porch for 10 full minutes, staring, jaw set like stone. I didn't attend the family dinner that year, obviously. But I heard about it. Heard it got awkward fast. Heard my mom called me ungrateful and dramatic. Heard someone tried to laugh it off and someone else told them to shut up. Heard it crack something they'd been trying to hold together with fake smiles and group texts. Good. Let it crack. Let it all come down. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't on the outside looking in. I was above it. Literally. And that view? That view was everything. There's always that moment after you light the fuse where time stretches thin and everything goes quiet, like the air itself is holding its breath, waiting to see how big the explosion's going to be. That's what it felt like in the days right after the billboard went up. I didn't post about it, didn't send out texts, didn't gloat or brag or even comment online. I just let it sit there, tall and unbothered, like a monument to every time they cut me out of the frame, every dinner I was left out of, every silence I had to swallow. It was Grandma who saw it first. Apparently, she was out watering the plants, even though it was cold as hell, just one of her weird old habits that probably made no sense except to her. She looked up, saw my face staring back, and just froze. Didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't march inside and call the whole family. She just stood there, lips pressed tight, eyes squinting like the sunlight might change what she was looking at if she blinked enough times. I don't know how long she stayed there, but someone must have driven by and seen it, because within 20 minutes, the group chat blew up. I wasn't in the chat, of course. I hadn't been for years. But screenshots started leaking. My cousin Derek forwarded me a few. He always was the type who liked chaos more than people. First there was Blake, typing in all caps like a 12-year-old, saying I had finally lost my ******ing mind. Then Sarah chimed in, calling it petty and a desperate cry for attention, which was rich coming from someone who once faked a pregnancy to get her boyfriend to propose. Mom didn't type anything. At least not at first. No, she called. Straight to voicemail. Her message was almost comical in its performance, like she had rehearsed it in the mirror before dialing. Miles, I don't even know what to say. I'm just so hurt. We've always loved you, even when things were tense. This just feels like an attack, and I don't understand why you'd want to humiliate your family like this. Call me back if you want to talk. If I want to talk. Like there was still a conversation we hadn't already had 100 times in my head, 100 ways it could have gone, 100 apologies that never came. I didn't call back. Instead, I played the voicemail on repeat until it sounded like white noise, like static you'd hear on an old TV when the signal cuts out. The more I listened, the less I heard sincerity. What I heard was shame, not about what they did to me, but about being exposed. This wasn't guilt. This was embarrassment, the kind that creeps up your spine when someone drags your secrets out into daylight. But not everyone in the family reacted with fire and brimstone. One of my aunts, Aunt Linda, the one who always slipped me an extra 20 at birthdays when no one was looking, sent a text. Just 4 words. Proud of you, Miles. No punctuation. No heart emoji. Just a straight shot to the gut. I read it a dozen times before I could reply. I wrote thanks, then erased it. Then I wrote means more than you know, and sent that instead. A few cousins, mostly younger ones who barely remembered the family drama, reposted the Billboard photo that someone had uploaded to Facebook. They added laughing faces or clapping hands or just wrote, legend. One even tagged me, which felt surreal, like they weren't ashamed to be associated with me anymore, now that I had currency in the real world. I didn't know whether to feel vindicated or disgusted. And while all of this was unraveling back home, I was across the country standing on a stage in front of 200 entrepreneurs at a tech summit in San Diego, giving a speech about resilience and reinvention. I talked about failure, about risk, about being underestimated. I talked about building a life from scratch. I didn't talk about the billboard. I didn't say a single word about my family, but I could feel it humming underneath every line. The audience didn't know the story, but they felt it. They heard the edge in my voice. They saw the steel behind the smile. After the talk, a woman in her 50s came up to me. She said, I don't know what you've been through, but you speak like someone who's had to scream just to be heard. I looked her straight in the eye and said, that's exactly what it is. Later that night, after the applause and the handshakes and the fake congratulations from investors who only cared about the next big return, I sat alone in my hotel room, looking out over the bay. My phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from my mom. I didn't play it this time. I just watched the notification fade off the screen and thought about how quiet the room felt. Not peaceful, not exactly. Just quiet. That's the thing no one tells you about proving yourself to people who never believed in you. It doesn't fill the hole. It doesn't erase the past. It just makes the silence louder when you finally stop asking for approval. Somewhere in that stillness, I started to wonder if maybe the whole thing, the money, the stage, the billboard, wasn't about revenge. Maybe it wasn't even about them anymore. Maybe it was just about proving, once and for all, that I did exist and that my story wasn't something they got to edit out for the sake of a clean photo. But even with all that, even with the validation, the headlines, the messages from strangers saying I inspired them, there was still no apology from my mom. Not even a fake one. And somehow that still stung more than it should have. because deep down, a part of me still hoped for one. Still hoped she'd call and say, "I'm sorry, Miles. We were wrong." But she didn't. She wouldn't. And maybe she never will. So I poured myself a drink, opened my laptop, and stared at the photo of the billboard one more time. Big, bold, unapologetic. I closed the laptop and whispered to the room, "Justice or ego? What's the difference when no one's listening?" There are invitations you wait your whole life for, and then there are the ones that show up like a loaded gun on your doorstep, silent and heavy with implications, and this one fell straight into the second category. The text came late on a Thursday night from my Uncle Gary, which was already strange since he hadn't spoken directly to me in over 5 years, not after the argument where he accused me of thinking I was better than everyone just because I didn't work with my hands. I read the message 3 times before I even let it sink in. Family dinner. Saturday. Grandma's. It's time we talked. That was it. No hope you're well, no context, no apologies. Just a command disguised as an olive branch. And maybe I should have ignored it. Maybe I should have deleted it and gone about my weekend like it didn't matter. But I didn't, because part of me wanted to see them squirm. Part of me needed to walk into that house and watch them try to explain, for once, why they had pushed me so far out that I had to put my face 40 feet in the air just to get a goddamn reaction. So I went. I wore a black blazer over a crisp white shirt, no tie, just enough polish to say I was in control. I pulled up to Grandma's house, same porch swing, same cracked driveway, same wind chimes that had always annoyed me as a kid, and parked across the street, where my billboard still loomed over the entire block like a middle finger in neon. I stood there for a second before walking in, just soaking it all in, letting the weight of it settle on my shoulders. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was ready. The moment I stepped through the door, I felt the tension like a wall of humidity, thick, hot, suffocating. The room went quiet. Not a single person looked directly at me at first. Grandma was in her recliner, stiff-backed and unreadable. Blake was by the kitchen counter, arms crossed like a bouncer outside a club he didn't belong in. My mom stood near the hallway, clutching a mug like it might shatter if she let go. There were others, cousins, aunts, even Uncle Gary, every one of them there, every one of them waiting for me to speak first. But I didn't. I sat down at the head of the table like I owned the damn place, because in that moment, I did. Not the house, not the family, but the moment. It belonged to me, and they knew it. Nobody touched the food. It was all laid out, steaming and untouched, the scent of roasted chicken and sweet potatoes and overcooked green beans hanging in the air like perfume in a funeral home. Finally, my mom cleared her throat, soft and unsure, and said, "Miles, we wanted to have this dinner because we think things got out of hand." I leaned back, hands folded in my lap, and asked, "When exactly did they get out of hand? Was it when you cropped me out of my own childhood photo, or was it when you lied to me about the Christmas dinner for the 5th year in a row?" That shut her up. Then Blake spoke. Loud, defensive, typical. "You didn't have to embarrass us, man. That billboard? That was a bitch move." I turned to him slowly, smiled like I was greeting a client I was about to bankrupt, and said, "You embarrassed me for 30 goddamn years. All I did was give you a mirror." Silence. Aunt Carol tried to jump in, said something about healing and moving forward, but the words just evaporated in the heat. And then something strange happened. People started talking. Really talking. Like floodgates cracking under pressure. My cousin Maria, who'd barely spoken in family gatherings, suddenly brought up how Blake once borrowed $5,000 from her to pay off a DUI and never paid it back. Uncle Gary started accusing my mom of manipulating Grandma into changing her will a few years ago, which set off a shouting match that nearly knocked over a bowl of mashed potatoes. Secrets spilled like cheap wine. Grandma finally spoke, low but sharp. "This family's been broken for a long time. That billboard just made it harder to pretend." And there it was. The one truth nobody wanted to say out loud. That I hadn't destroyed anything. I just pulled back the curtain. They kept yelling. Accusations about money, about favoritism, about who helped and who disappeared when someone got sick. It was chaos, but it was real, maybe the most honest conversation this family had ever had. I just sat there, silent, watching the mess unfold like someone watching a house burn down that he didn't want to live in anymore anyway. Eventually, people started leaving. One by one, they gathered their coats, muttered half-hearted goodbyes, eyes avoiding mine. No one apologized. Not really. A few people said things like it didn't have to go this way, which, to me, sounded a lot like blaming the fire for burning after they poured the gasoline. When I left, Grandma stood at the door, didn't hug me, didn't smile. She just looked at me and said, "You got your point across, Miles. I hope it was worth it." I didn't answer, because I didn't know yet. All I knew was that for the first time in my life, the room wasn't filled with fake smiles and polite lies. For the first time, the masks were off. And maybe that wasn't peace, but damn if it wasn't honest. You spend enough years building walls to protect yourself from the people who were supposed to build you up, and eventually, you start thinking you don't need anything from them, not love, not forgiveness, not even the truth. But then something small and unexpected happens, and the whole thing cracks wide open, not with a bang, but with the quiet rustle of old paper pulled from the bottom of a dusty tin. It was a few days after the dinner, maybe 3 or 4, though I'd stopped counting because time didn't feel real anymore, not after what had been said and what had finally been unsaid in that living room. I hadn't heard from most of them since the night the dinner disintegrated into accusations and cold stares. My mom had texted a passive-aggressive message about how I got what I wanted. I didn't respond. Grandma hadn't called. I figured that was that. The war was over. Everyone had gone back to their corners to lick wounds they'd never admit to having. So when I pulled into Grandma's driveway on a cold Tuesday afternoon, I didn't expect anything. I wasn't there to fight. I wasn't there to gloat or apologize. I just wanted to drop off a bag of groceries, something I used to do quietly every now and then, even after she stopped including me in birthdays and holidays. I'd leave them on the steps and drive off. It wasn't forgiveness. It was routine. But this time, she was waiting. She opened the door before I even knocked. No smile. No welcome. Just those sharp eyes of hers and a voice that didn't ask, it ordered. "Come in. I have something for you." I stepped inside cautiously, half expecting another lecture, another passive note about how I'd hurt the family. But she said nothing as she led me into the kitchen, opened the cabinet above the stove, the one with the stupid ceramic cookie jar shaped like a rooster, and pulled the whole thing down with both hands like it weighed 50 pounds. She placed it on the table and popped the lid. Inside was a sealed envelope, yellowed with age, my name scrawled on it in thick black ink, handwriting I hadn't seen since I was 12 years old. My stomach dropped. My breath caught in my throat. "Your father left this for you," she said, her voice flat but softer than I'd ever heard it. "Back in '05. Told me to give it to you when the time was right." I stared at the envelope, hands frozen. "Why now?" She didn't answer. She just walked out of the kitchen and left me there, alone with the letter and a past I thought had nothing left to show me. It took me several minutes to open it. I didn't know what I expected, a few empty words, maybe, or worse, a final insult from a man who'd never been around long enough to know me, let alone write something meaningful. But when I slid the paper out and started to read, it felt like the floor under me shifted just slightly, like the world tilted a few degrees in a direction I hadn't seen coming. "Miles, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get a chance to say these things in person. Maybe that's my fault. Maybe that's just how life works when you're a Carter man and you've been taught to run before you break. But there's one thing I want you to know before anything else. They won't understand you. That's not your fault. You're going to be different, Miles. You're going to think bigger. You're going to chase things they don't believe in. That's going to scare them. Maybe even make them resent you. They'll try to box you in. Try to cut you down to size. Not because they hate you, but because they're afraid of being left behind. But you weren't made to fit into their picture. You were made to build your own. That's going to be a lonely road sometimes. But don't let it make you bitter. Let it make you clear. And when the time comes, and it will come, when you feel like burning it all down just to be seen, remember this. You were always seen. At least by me. Love. Dad, I didn't cry, not at first. Not while reading. I just sat there, holding that single piece of paper like it weighed 100 pounds, and I read it again. Then a third time. Each sentence dug into a place I thought had long since scarred over. But it hadn't. It had just been waiting. Because the truth is, the billboard was never about revenge, not really. It was about the ache of invisibility. It was about the hunger to be seen by the people who claim to know you best and love you anyway, even when you don't fit their mold, even when you outgrow the cage they built. It wasn't a scream. It was a flare. A signal fire. And for the first time, sitting in that silent kitchen with a rooster-shaped cookie jar and my father's words echoing through my bones, I felt the child version of me. The one who used to press his face against the glass of every family photo and wonder why he didn't belong, stand up inside me. Not angry. Not triumphant. Just there. Just real. I folded the letter slowly, slipped it back into the envelope, and held it against my chest like something sacred. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like a man at war. I felt like a boy who'd been waiting a long time for someone to say what no one else ever had. That I was seen. And that it wasn't my fault. There's a kind of quiet that settles in after the storm finally burns itself out. Not peace, not closure, just the slow realization that the noise is gone and now you have to live with whatever's left. That's the place I found myself in, standing in front of my computer on a random Wednesday morning, staring at the email confirmation that the billboard would come down by the end of the week. No more golden-lit photo of my face towering over the neighborhood, no more bold white letters asking the question that kicked the hornet's nest. Just an empty space again, a literal blank slate. I didn't make a big deal out of it, didn't tell anyone. Didn't post a cryptic message online or send a final jab in the family group chat, even though a small, bitter part of me fantasized about it. The truth was, it didn't feel like victory. It didn't feel like anything, really. Just the inevitable end of a message that had already been delivered loud enough for everyone to hear. The billboard had said what I needed it to say. And now it was time for it to disappear, just like I had all those years ago. 2 days later, I got a text from my mom. 3 words. You win. Happy now? No punctuation. No warmth. Just those 3 words hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. I didn't answer. Because I didn't know what the hell that even meant anymore. Did I win? If so, what did I win? The freedom to be alone in my truth? The ability to finally silence the voice in my head that kept asking what I'd done wrong? Or was the win just a hollow space where family used to be clean, empty, and cold? I stared at her message for a long time, watching it blink on my screen like a wound that refused to close. And then I deleted it. Not because I was angry. Not even because I wanted to forget. I just didn't want her words to be the last ones in our story. Later that week, I flew to New York for a live interview on a late-night business show, the kind where the host smiles too much and pretends to care about your childhood for 15 seconds before asking you about your revenue model. They asked about my company, my journey, my philosophies on failure and innovation. They asked if I had a support system, and I said I had to build one. They asked who I credited for my discipline, and I said probably the people who underestimated me. Not once did I mention my mother. Not once did I say the word family, because I knew if I did, the dam would break. After the taping, I sat in the green room, sipping a glass of water that tasted like nothing, watching my own face on the monitor with a strange sense of distance, like I was watching someone else entirely. And maybe I was. Maybe that version of me, the one who fought so hard to be seen, was finally fading into the version who no longer needed to be. The next morning, I flew back home. Drove straight from the airport to the street where the billboard used to be. It was already gone. The metal frame stood bare, the canvas stripped, nothing left but a ghost in the shape of my former outrage. No messages. No photos. Just a skeleton in the sky. I pulled over and just sat there in the car, engine ticking, the sun already starting to drop behind the row of familiar rooftops. Across the street, Grandma's porch was quiet, the swing moving slightly in the wind like some forgotten metronome, still ticking out the beat of a family that never found rhythm. I rolled down the window, let the cool air hit my face, and for a moment I thought about getting out, walking up the steps, knocking one last time. But I didn't, because there was nothing left to say. They had made their picture. I had made mine. We just weren't in the same frame anymore. And maybe we never were. I pulled out my phone, looked at the empty camera roll, and thought about how many moments I'd spent chasing their approval, their inclusion, their version of love, the kind that comes with strings and expectations and matching outfits. And then I looked up at the sky again, at that blank billboard, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled without bitterness. Because sometimes the most powerful message is the silence that follows the last word. I turned the key in the ignition, shifted into drive, and rolled down the street, past the church, the gas station, the park where Blake once pushed me into a pond on a dare. And as I passed the corner where the billboard used to stand proud and bright, I slowed the car just enough to glance out the window. And I said, not to anyone in particular, maybe not even aloud, maybe just to myself or the boy I used to be, they wanted a picture without me. I took a breath. Now the whole damn country's looking at just me. Then I paused. So tell me, who's the real outcast now? And I kept driving, no destination in mind, just forward. Because I didn't need to be in their photo anymore. I had become the frame.